Hello church, and welcome back to what I think is the 19th in our series of biblical characters through the alphabet. Today we're on to the letter S. Now I looked at all of the letters and the characters before I started the series, and I had a name for every single one apart from S. And I've looked at all of the different characters beginning with S, and one stands out as an important one that I should address. And that's Satan, which is a massive and very difficult topic, and one that, again, I do not have all the answers on. So I'm going to do my best, and I hope that's okay. Feel free to disagree with me, or to agree with me. That's also fine. And I hope it's a helpful video, even if I don't fully have all the answers myself. So I wanted to start by thinking about what experience do we have of Satan? What teaching do we have? And if I'm honest, for most of my life, the teaching I had on Satan was based on children's songs. I don't know if you ever sang them. There was one that was lower, 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 stamp Satan lower, which was one I quite enjoyed. Or more recently, we've sang at Messy Church, put on the full armour of God, stand strong against the evil one. And we refer to Satan in these songs and the fact that we just want to get rid of him. And that was a lot of my teaching, really, until I went to Malawi. Now in Malawi, I came across a whole other sort of spiritual dimension that they just don't really seem to experience here. I've had friends here who claim to be witches, but they don't do anything. So, and it's never had much effect. In Malawi, I came across women who said that they conversed with these spirits that weren't God and sent evil into people's lives, and people became sick, or found children with red thread tied around their midriffs, and those children tended to try and hurt their parents at night, and it all seemed a bit bizarre, and this worship of a spirit that isn't God, that for the purpose of this I'm going to call Satan. I've got a friend who often says to me, when things are going really well and you're doing something important for God, when you've got a mission, that's when Satan is most likely to attack. That's when bad things are likely to happen in your life that are going to try and discourage you and bring you down. And she attributes those things that happen at that time to a satanic force that is trying to battle against the good that we're doing. I've also read a book by C.S. Lewis, which is fantastic. I highly recommend it, called The Screwtape Letters, which is about demons more than Satan, and how they work to try and bring Christians away from God. And it is a fantastic book. As I say, I highly recommend it because it's really insightful into what Christian life can be like and the struggles that we face. It's also in another of Satan appears in the last battle in the Chronicles of Narnia, where there's, at the end of all things, there is God and there is Satan, and they're deciding to whom does each person belong. Do they go and live with God, or do they go and live with Satan? They're not called those names, but I can't remember the name of Satan in that book. So those are different ways that I've sort of had some insight into Satan through my life, not very many. So I thought, well, what about Satan in the Bible? That is the point of this series. In the Old Testament, you'd think that that's where he would appear most, but actually there's not very much about Satan in the Old Testament. There's, of course, the snake right at the beginning, setting up this sort of image of good and evil, and how evil has come into human life. And then there's the story of Job. And what's interesting about that is Satan appears in conversation with God. But the word that's used is the Satan. It's not Satan as a person, it's the Satan, the Satan. He's not actually personified in the Old Testament very much. So even though he has this sort of conversation with God, it's still not clear whether it's one being and one person that's in this conversation with God. And the other interesting thing about it is that the instances where we see Satan in the Old Testament, so in Job, and then we see him later as the accuser in the book of Zechariah, he accuses Joshua. and we see him later inciting David to do a census. In those places, he's still very much a sort of vague, not being as such, but a force maybe that we could understand in a lot of different ways. And then we come to the New Testament, and Satan is actually more prevalent in the New Testament than he is in the Old Testament, which I was quite surprised by. He's set up as this anti-God and harmful against humanity being, and he is far more personified. We see him in 1 Peter 5 verse 8. I'm looking down because I've got the verse open here. Like a roaring lion, your adversary, the devil, prowls around looking for someone to devour. He's seen as a very specific person set up in total opposition to God and with a real hatred for humans. We see him when Jesus is tempted in the desert, trying to pull Jesus away from God's plan. And it's interesting that because in Matthew 16 verse 23, that's the famous line where Jesus is explaining that he's going to have to die to his disciples, and Peter says, "No, that's never going to happen to you." And Jesus replies with those words, "Get you behind me, Satan. What you want is not the things of God, you want the things of man." And it's interesting that whenever there's something that is really anti-God, that is when Jesus uses that word Satan and calls it Satan when something is in total contradiction to the plan of God. We see him in Luke chapter 22. It's interesting because Satan is blamed for being in Judas when Judas betrays Jesus, and is also blamed for being in Peter when Peter denies Jesus. And of course the most famous book of the Bible that deals with Satan is the book of Revelation, where it talks about the war between God and Satan and this battle that is going on, and how God overcomes all evil and overcomes Satan, who's described as Beelzebub and the evil one and the serpent and the dragon, and he has all of these names that he's called, and he gets thrown down into that fiery pit. So, with all of that context, what is God saying about Satan and who we are? And the passage that I keep coming back to is that passage about the armour of God. You know, you have the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, you've got the belt of truth, your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of Christ, with the sword of the Spirit and the shield of faith with which we can extinguish all the arrows of the evil one. And at the end of that passage, it talks about the fact that our fight is not with flesh and blood, but with the evil forces and in the spiritual realm. We often don't talk about the spiritual realm, and especially not about the evil side of it. We've talked about angels in this series, and we talk about God and the Holy Spirit, but we don't talk about evil very much. But evil exists. And I think we are in a battle against it because it is hard. It's hard to make right decisions all of the time. It's hard to keep loving people all of the time. It's hard to be righteous and good. It's hard to have all those fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness and self-control all of the time. It's a battle to be godlike and Christ-like. It's a battle to keep close to God. And we are part of that army of God. As a teenager, I went on a camp, and they split the boys and girls apart, and the boys were all told that they were warriors, and we were told that we were warrior princesses, but we needed to make space to let the men be the warriors. Don't know how helpful that's been in my life, but I think it's true that we are fighting, and that image is used in the Bible a lot, that we are at war with what is wrong and what is hard in this life. In preparing for this video, I talked again to a lot of people because I had no idea what to really say. And one of the people I talked to is not a Christian. And when I said I wanted to talk about Satan, he said, well, the interesting thing, Kirsty, is that you've got a book about God and you read it and you believe it. How would you feel if you had a book about Satan? Would you not just then be on his side? Are you not just convinced by the words of this book? And I went away and I thought about that, and I thought about who God is and the author of our book. And the author of the Bible stands for what is right. When you read the 10 Commandments, do not murder, do not lie, do not steal, do not commit adultery, do not envy, do not boast. You've got do not boast. That's not in one. I'm sorry. I've added an extra commandment there. Our God is a God of good things, and following him is not always easy, but it leads to a life that we can be proud of, that we can look and say, this is right. We can look at ourselves and know that we are washed by that blood of Christ, and know that we have a future in a place where there is not pain, where there's not hurt, where there's not one-upmanship, where there's not spite and malice. Because we serve a God that we can be proud to serve, that we can trust in, who is never changing, who is almighty, who is above all things, and who wants good things for us. And the guidelines that he puts in place in the Bible are ones that are going to build us up and take us to good things. The heaven that he promises us is one of beauty and peace with each other, one where there is not hurt, where there is not pain, where there's not hunger or thirst. And the Satan that we hear about is against all of those things. We used to sing another song growing up. I met Jesus at the crossroads where the two ways meet. Satan too was standing there, and he said, come this way. Lots and lots of pleasures I can give to you today. Evil is sly, and it's tricking, and it makes you think that what he's got to offer is good. He makes you think, well, yes, if you follow me and you work for yourself and you act selfishly, you're going to get good things, and it's not true. The book of Satan is a book that says, put yourself first and don't worry about anybody else. Come and follow me and care about money, care about comfort, care about yourself, and let everything else care about itself. And where that leads is horrible and horrific, because it leads to people treating each other in awful ways. And that rebounds on everybody and everything. And the reason that I love God, the reason that I love the Bible, the reason that I am anti-Satan is that I know that a life with God is going to feed me and lift me up and take me to a good place. It's why I denounce all things that are anti-God. It's why it's okay to say I hate Satan, because he is against this God that I love. I'm going to pray for us. God, I thank you that you are so powerful. I thank you that the battle is won. I thank you that you are a God who is good and loving and compassionate and kind. I thank you for the sacrifice that Jesus made on that cross that saves us from the power of Satan and evil and brings us into your kingdom. Keep us, Lord, in your kingdom. Keep us safe and close to you. And help us and equip us as we battle against the evil that tries so hard to get a stronghold in our lives. Amen. Well, that was a massive topic. Thank you for keeping with me the whole way through that video, and I'll see you next time when we're back onto the letter T. Bye.